Welcome back, everybody. AB Conversations. A very, very special guest with me today, Brendan Frazier, founder of Wired Planning, the host of Human Side of Money podcast, which is easily the number one podcast on behavioral finance out there right now. Brendan's a keynote speaker and Investopedia top 100 advisor for 2 years running now, creating an awesome community of people dedicated now to behavioral finance, educating and inspiring others to get involved in that. And he happens to be a pretty cool guy. So honored to have you with me today, Brendan. Thanks for doing this. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you got to be kind of careful when you say very special guest, Brendan Frazier, because there's also the actor, Brendan Frazier. Right. So I'm used to just being like the guy that lets everybody down everywhere I go. You show up at a restaurant where you have a reservation and they're like, is that Brendan Frazier? Like deeper, and you show up and you're kind of like, wah, wah. So you got to be careful introducing as a very special guest, just throwing that out there.
Well, look, I got to tell you, I know we've had the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit, but after reading that intro, I'm feeling a little nervous. Like in the advising world here, you do have celebrity status. So this is now feeling like a tad intimidating. I'm not gonna lie.
No. I think you and we live in a bubble is what it is. So maybe it may feel that way. I'm not sure it's actually that way, but no, it's I appreciate you having me on, and I've enjoyed all of our interactions, and somebody that I've enjoyed getting to know. And it's been the cool part about doing this is getting to meet cool people doing great work all over not just the country, but all over the world.
Yeah. I'm excited to talk about that. Let me maybe frame the conversation up for the audience today. We met because I was inspired by your passion around what you've kind of coined the human side of advising, which I guess explained to the non-advising world, might be to speak about the industry that we kind of grew up in, right? Where sales techniques and numbers and pie charts and market commentary was kind of like the technical side of what we were taught to do was all you were taught to do. And here we are kind of needing to admit that if we're in the job of helping people, we need to learn how to actually help them. And that's going to be maybe shifting the conversation a little bit to what they value and deconstructing their thoughts and feelings. So if that can kind of be our launching pad, I'd love for you maybe to just tell us how this all got started for you and kind of what led you to embark on this journey.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's one of those things where like what you just said about what I'm doing is in the idea of like, hey, we're all emotional human beings and we're talking about the emotional topic of money, the idea that I believe this at the core. Nobody truly wants to maximize their net worth. They just want to maximize the life that they live day in and day out, and the quality of their sleep that they get at night, right? You just want to live your best life and have peace of mind that you can always do that. But historically, this industry has just been financial services, financial advice has been so focused on just all the numbers, the spreadsheets, the projections, right, the market, and those things are all 100% required and necessary, right? It's not like we can go without them, but it's like the focus was solely and entirely on that. And there's this whole other realm of the relationship that had to do with behavior and psychology and communication that was just sort of like, it was almost like an afterthought. Like, well, it's something that we do, but like, we're not going to really talk about it or focus on it. So in a previous job, I was in a role where I was able to consult with financial advisors. So I was going around the country, meeting with advisors, face-to-face, consulting with them on a number of different things. And so naturally you end up having a ton of conversations. That was the cool part, is I got to see and experience literally thousands of different ways to run a practice, to work with clients, to run a business, right? So you see the best of the best, you see the worst of the worst, you have tons of conversations, but there is this one theme that kept coming up over and over, and you'd hear it time and time again. And it was one of two things. It was either, Brendan, sometimes I feel more like a therapist than I do a financial advisor, or it'd be, Brendan, I oftentimes I think I'd be better off if I had a degree in psychology instead of a degree in finance or economics or studying the markets, right? Because basically, if we translate that, what that meant was what advisors were saying was, I realized that there's more to this job than just numbers. Like there's the other side of the table, and I've been well equipped, trained in how to handle the numbers side. right? I know how
Right.
to I know how to manage the spreadsheets. I know how to run calculations, but I haven't gotten the adequate amount of training on how to deal with emotional human beings on the emotionally charged topic of money. And so naturally, when I would hear those phrases, right? Like I think I'm more of a therapist than an advisor. I wish I had a degree in
Right.
psychology instead of finance. My next natural question would always be like, I hear that a lot. So I'm just kind of curious, what is it that you do to get better at that in that realm, right? If you say that it's that important, if someone would even say it was a bigger part of their job, like what have you done to develop, hone, improve your skills in that arena? And it would just always be this blank stare, right? It's like,
Right. Yeah.
not a lot. Like I've read a book,
Yeah.
I don't know. I just kind of learn it naturally and so on and so forth. And that just always, that never sat well with me, right? Where it's just like, hey, wait a minute. So everybody says that they need it. They know that it's important, but they don't really know what to do about it. And so I had this moment where I was like, you know what? I enjoy this stuff. Like I like legitimately enjoy learning about that stuff. So that was a big piece of it, right? But I just thought like, okay,
Sure.
I can't be the only person that sees a need here, right? We can't be the only person that's interested in helping solve how to do that. And so, anyways, that's where the podcast or the business was born. Was this mission to basically say, hey, this is the training that every advisor needs but never received in courses, designations, and certifications. So I sort of embarked on this quest to try to make it more digestible and applicable for
Yep.
advisors to help accelerate their path to being able to do that.
Yeah. So you have this aha moment with all these conversations, and diving a little bit deeper there, that kind of meant I'm gonna quit my job and I'm gonna make this my thing. So clearly that took a little bit of conviction, right? Um, but
Uh,
now you're essentially, for somebody a little bit on the outside of that, but I like to be well read. I like to know what's going on in the industry. You've now interviewed some amazing people. So how did you really go about kind of creating the environment now where you are able to get these people on and provide this through podcasts to everybody that wants to be a part of it?
yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because it's funny. It's one of those things where like you look at it now, and it's easy to look back. It's easy to go back and trace back from now to 2018 when it started, and formulate and see like this picture of why it was like, oh, of course it made sense now, right? Like I started then, and like here we are all these years later, and this is what it's morphed into, and this is what I thought it was going to be, right? And it's because of all these things that I did, and it's like, but and this is something that happens like psychologically with human beings. We go back, we construct these stories that make sense, that usually make us look good, that sort of thing. But honestly,
Yeah.
it's a classic example of I think three things. One is just identifying and sensing and filling a need, right? Just like classic business success 101 says, like, deliver what people want and they don't necessarily have, essentially, right? Number two is just, I think, consistency, just sort of saying like, all right, I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it for certain segments of time, and I'm going to evaluate. So what they call signposts. So I put signposts in place and said, all right, if it's not here in this period of time, that tells me that it's not what I want it to be, and I need to move on and do something else. Move on and try something else. In fact, there's a book behind me right now. You can't see it because of this, because of my great looking background that you provided, called Thinking in Bets, where Andy Duke talks about that. And so I remember reading that, going, all right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set this signpost up. I'm going to give myself 6 months. And if there's not this many downloads, and if there's not this many people subscribed to the newsletter, that means that I was off. I thought people were interested, but they just aren't. I need to go back and invest my time elsewhere. So I did that for, I guess, several. I still do it to this day, right? I to just track and measure where I'm at, but it's
Yeah.
less about confirming demand, right? And now it's less about validating the idea and more about, am I doing the right things to move in the right direction? But back then it really was like an idea validation thing of like, okay, if I'm not to this point or at least close, then that signals me it's not going to happen. But so my goal was, my mission was, until that signpost popped up in 6 months,
Yeah.
like show up every day, be consistent, do something to spread the message and get the word out there. And then the last piece of it is to what you said. I've been really, really fortunate to have some awesome people come on the show, just people that before I started all this, I would sit there and think like, man, it would be so cool to talk to that person. That'd
Yeah,
be
right.
so great. Like, like you get butterflies, you get nervous. There's somebody that you look up to, and I still look up to them. And now a lot of them are more like friends, which is almost even more bizarre to say. And so I think it's not fair for me to just say like, oh, I had this vision and created it. I also owe a lot of the, I think, success, however you want to define that, to those people that were willing to say, hey, yeah, Brendan, I'll come on this podcast with you and talk about this stuff, and even take a chance on you in the early days when, there
Right.
there weren't even that many people listening. Right. So it's not just, nothing can be done alone. Right? Well, I guess things can be done alone, but nothing that great can be done alone. So I try, as every chance I get, I try to praise those people, the guests, the people that come on the show, because without them, it wouldn't even exist.
Yeah, and it's almost like that iceberg illusion, I guess, is kind of what I'm hearing from you. The whole, you can look back and like, how much stress did you go through? How much discipline did you need? How much risk was it? That's all the stuff that nobody else is now going to see. But how many? I'm curious, those guideposts. How many advisors are you now reaching with that content? Did I hear that's like you hit a mile marker recently?
Yeah. So, and podcasts are weird because there's so many, nobody knows the best way to track and measure podcasts because there's so many different ways you can do it. But so the podcast has been out for less than 2 years. We publish bi-monthly, twice a month, right? So not even every week. And then so that hit 50,000 downloads like a couple weeks ago. So 50,000 downloads, which is kind of crazy to think about, but also awesome, fun to think about. Especially since it's only been every other week, right? It's not even like most podcasts that go every week. Now, granted, they're long podcasts, so I'm not sure that if I did it every week that there would be that many people listening that often. But I'm a big believer in I like the long form podcast. So that, and then the other way one of the other ways that I measure and track is a little bit through social media. Just how's the following increasing on there and engagement on there. But one of the other main signposts that I've used from the beginning has been the people that have signed up to be in the email community, the subscribers to the newsletter and the email community. And that's on its way to, I think 12, I looked yesterday, it's almost at 1,200 advisors. But the cool part
Awesome.
is, well, it is, but what's interesting is like, I think about the number of advisors that exist around the
200,
world.
like 270, what is it? 270,000, 300,000?
Something like that. And that might even be in the US.
I think that's a US
Right.
number. You're right.
And so like, the cool part, that's what I was gonna say. The cool part about this whole thing has been seeing the amount of interest and engagement and interaction, not just in the US, but literally around the world. And for whatever reason, I just didn't really expect that as much, but like speaking requests from South Africa, Canada, the UK, like that's been maybe the most rewarding part of it all. But yeah, so you say let's say there's 270,000 here, there's advisors around the world. Like, so 12, this is how I keep myself motivated. I go, wait a minute, 1,200 is a fraction of the number. And now it's only been a couple of years, right? But like, still, it's just a fraction of the number of people that are out there that are in the potential audience, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. So
Yeah, the early adopters though. So yeah, I was going to ask, kind of point of arrival for you, ultimate goal, what keeps you motivated? There's a lot of people out there that still need to be hearing about this work. You're going to get there. So
yeah.
let me maybe make a soft pivot to talking about that work then. At the root of relationships, what we're talking about here is building trust and rapport. And that means good communication, or maybe more specifically, asking good, genuine, thoughtful questions. People like to talk about themselves, but we're not always good at listening. So let's talk about that. You've said before that the quality of the answers you get are a direct reflection of the quality of the questions asked. Tell us kind of what you mean by that and what you've learned.
Yeah, so that's one way to say it. The other way that I like to say it is ask better questions, get better answers, if you want a more simplified version of it, right? But it all means the same thing. So I think the best way to describe it is pretty much to think about, anybody that has kids knows exactly what I'm talking about, because, and it's funny, whenever when you and I were going through it, but whenever I'm working with advisors on some of these communication skills, like asking questions, and we're going through these programs and talking about it and learning it, inevitably every time somebody will mention to me how you've been able to use it to improve their relationships with their kids or their
No
spouse,
doubt.
because it translates into so many other areas of life. But the example that I'll use is somebody that told me when I was talking to him, they're like, hey, Brendan, Like, I hear what you're saying about all this. I'm trying to do a better job asking questions and getting people to open up. But like this morning, for example, I was at work, I was in the break room, somebody came in and I asked them, hey, how was your weekend? Right. So like, that was me
Good.
engaging, asking questions. Yeah, right. See, and so he said he was frustrated, right? He's like, they didn't feel like opening up. They didn't want to talk. That kind of bothers me if somebody like blows me off like that and doesn't really want to. I'm interested to hear how their weekend went. And they're not going to tell me. And so, and I kind of carefully went about it, right? I was delicate about it. But I was like, hang on, hey, let's think for a second. Is it possible that it wasn't that they weren't interested and didn't want to talk, but maybe the question that you asked wasn't designed to get the answer, to get them talking and to get a good answer? So how was your weekend, or what's going on this weekend, is not an easy way to get somebody talking. That's kind of a hard question to answer. Or if it's not hard, you're setting yourself up for a one-word answer, like good.
Yeah.
Right. Or it was fine. Right. Yeah, exactly. So the idea is like, okay, the answer that he got, it's easy for the person that asked the question to blame the person answering, right? It's easy for the asker to blame the responder and say, all right, well, they just didn't really feel like talking. But if we pause for a second, we could think, hang on, is there a way that you could have asked a different question, or asked the question differently, that is more, that facilitates a better response, that elicits a better response? So instead of, hey, how was your weekend? Good. You can say, hey, did you get into anything this weekend? What was the best thing you did this weekend? Did you do anything really fun this weekend? Right. I wouldn't even say, did you do anything really fun? Because that's an easy yes, no, out question. Right. But you're asking a similar question with a different vibe and twisting it to get, not twisting it, but designing it to get actually a better response. Right. And so like with kids, so you come home from work, kids come home from school, you're sitting there at the dinner table, and we think, oh man, like teenagers, they just never want to talk. Well, what are you asking them? Right. Like, so how was your day? Oh, good. Did you learn anything at school? Yeah. What'd you learn? I don't know. But if you were to ask something different, right? Like ask like, hey, what was the best part of your day today? What'd you and your friends talk about? Now, maybe teenagers don't want to tell you that, right? But let's start thinking about ways to ask questions that people actually want to answer, instead of just asking questions to ask a question. And once you do that, you ask better questions and you get better answers. It's one of those things that people look at and they think like it's a luck thing. Like, oh, I guess that person was just in a talkative mood today, right? The stars aligned. I woke up and I had enough coffee. So I was like, they had their coffee, so they were able to engage. But when you backtrack, when you reverse engineer and you look at it, these are things that they usually happen for a reason, and you can sort of start engineering or designing ways to get better answers from people.
It's the interesting thing to me, Brendan, on what you're kind of bringing to light here. When you think about it, the conversations that we have on a daily basis, and like you said, this isn't just about advising, this is about all relationships. These are tweaks, right? This is not meant to be heavy lifting. You are reframing some things conversationally. That does not take a 4-year degree to kind of figure out. It takes a little practice, right? It takes being a little bit more thoughtful. But if I'm just amazed that the work that you're doing really is bringing to light something that, when you think about it and when you start to practice it, how simple little changes, using your example, how was your weekend versus what was the best part of your weekend? That is seems like such a minute change, but can completely open up to better questions. So I love it. Do you have kind of favorite questions that you like to ask when getting to know somebody?
Not necessarily, right? So, but I do have a rule where I try not to ask the lazy questions, right? The ones like, hey, what do you do for a living? Where do you live? I'm trying to think what's another one. I'm struggling right now, but we all know the basic lazy questions, right? Because what we know about those questions is they're not designed to truly get to know and connect with somebody. When you ask those questions, you're doing it just A, to fill space, or B, because you're trying to size somebody up. You're trying to assess you're trying to learn more information about not who the person is, but like not truly who they are as a person, but you're just trying to learn more about them. Like, okay, where do they live? I wonder what they do. And so they're not designed to get to know somebody and connect with somebody really well. So I do have a rule, or I guess, that I try to implement, where I try not to ask the lazy questions, try to ask more engaging questions. Now, here's what's interesting though. When we hopped on here before we hit record, I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't get in the right headspace beforehand. And so the first thing I did was I asked you, I said, so, hey, how are things going? How's life? How are things in the Haas household? Like, and when I did it, I was like, that's
how's the
ironic.
family?
These are literally like lazy questions I shouldn't ask. So I took a minute and I pivoted to something you had going on in your life. I'm not sure if I can say it on here, but I asked you something more specific about like something that's going on in your business
Yeah.
right now. Right. And that actually got, now it wasn't like we sat there and just deeply connected over it. Right. But it at least ignited some conversational flow where you started talking instead of just saying, yeah, family's good, things are good, right? You opened up and told me a little bit more about that. And that gave me an opportunity to potentially ask more questions about that. And so anyways, it's funny. I sat there and was
Yeah.
like, I'm doing what I need to, like what I'm about to sit there and say not to do right now.
Yeah. But, you know, going all the way back to the point of the question that I'm asking you, you know, I firmly believe in what you have shared, that, you know, questions really are the superpower. If the intent here is to help people within our business, then the surefire way to become more likable and trusted is to deeply start to connect. And you can't do that without asking good questions about and learning what really matters most to people. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I think the way that you're going about creating a focus on that is something that really puts any advisor, anybody in a helping profession, in a better spot to not only connect but know what's going to connect with them. You know,
Yeah.
so I think, you know, stimulating conversation and you know, using good questions to do that is something we all can get better at.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I would say even in all aspects of your life, right? Like whether it's if you're applying for a job, you have a job interview, right? Like you're not, instead of just sitting there and responding to everything, like ask good, thoughtful, insightful questions that build some connection with you and the other person. It's sitting there with your kids that you want to engage with, that you want to connect with, right? And like learning a better way to do, like what could be more meaningful than that, right? Like learning a way to get them to open up and talk to you and trust you and connect with you as someone that they can tell things to, right? Or a spouse or a partner, kind of the same way. So yeah, I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, is because once it clicks, once you see it, once you do it, you start realizing, what's the best way to say this? It almost sounds like hyperbolic to say, but like the power that it has in terms of like impacting your life and your relationships and the connections that you have with people, whether it be in work or your personal life.
yeah, and then I guess the follow up to that is learning how to listen, you know, and let the responses to the questions you know, lead you down that path of continuing to learn more about others.
Yeah. Yeah. So you bringing up these two topics is pretty much like asking me to go for about 3 hours, or asking to record a 3 hour podcast. But so I'll say this, I think some of the main things I try to hit on there is like, and I got to actually stole this quote from somebody. It's one where you read it and you're like, man, I wish I would have come up with that. But they said that the key to understanding people better is in the quality of the follow-up questions that you ask. So the key to understanding people better is in asking follow-up questions, because generally when you ask a question, you just get sort of a top line, above the surface answer. And that's happening because most people, when they're responding, their mind's also looking at you going, are they actually interested, and do they actually care? What they need is permission to talk more. What they need is to know that you do care and you are interested. And as soon as their brain picks up on that, that's when things start flowing. They go, okay, they kind of throw this little test out there of like, I'm going to say this, see if they're interested, but their brain wants to know that you are. And as soon as that clicks, they'll start flowing. And so that's exactly what follow-up questions do. They signal to the other person that you are interested and curious and you want to know more. And that's when real understanding starts to happen. So that's the one thing I'd say. The other two things I'd say that I think are just, as far as like the how do you think about the benefits of listening, or how powerful truly good listening can be, is there's two stats that still continue to blow my mind. One is that when somebody gets to talk about themselves, when you listen and let somebody talk about themselves, it lights up the same area of the brain. And you know this, by the way, it lights up the same area of the brain as eating chocolate and sexual activity. It's the reward center of the brain. Right? So like if you don't like chocolate or you don't like sexual activity, you should know that the vast majority of people in your life like both of those things. It's rewarding, right? So, and getting somebody to talk about themselves, it lights up the same area of the brain. I think that's power. kind of crazy and powerful, number one. Number two,
For sure.
they've also done studies, they being people that are way smarter than me at this stuff. They've done studies that show when there are two people together and they're truly like present and listening to one another and seeking to understand what the other person's saying, their brain waves literally sync and connect. And that to me is just kind of mind blowing that all it takes is sitting there being truly present and trying to truly understand and engage with someone, and your brain waves truly get on the same path and start connecting. So it's like, this isn't just like, it's not something you just say and go, oh yeah, listening's powerful. It's literally, there's science that backs up how powerful it can actually be. And here's the thing, is that most people, when they ask, do you have somebody in your life that's a good listener? The majority, over 50%, say that they don't. Most people don't have somebody in their life that will truly sit there and listen and create the space to let somebody talk and flesh out ideas and clarify ideas and get their thoughts, feelings, and emotions out there. It's kind of a lost art, or I don't know if it's I don't know if it's ever found, but now it is, if nothing else these days, at least it's sort of lost art.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say, and I know that I've gone through this with you, but this isn't just Brendan's ideas. Like, this is time-tested studies on brain and activity, and this is science, So I go to the next part of really what I wanted to kind of hear from you today. There's this helping side of what we do that we need to be really good about knowing how to advise and be thoughtful tacticians. We need to become better listeners and be better about asking questions to better connect with what really matters to people. But then I shift that into, we need to inspire them to take action and do the things that they need to do that we know can put them in a better spot. So let me shift to like that last part, inspiring others. You've shared the stat. This blows my mind that 70% of our clients only implement 20% of our advice. That's shocking to me. That 20% feels like a massive failure. So let's talk about that. What do you think is kind of preventing either us as advisors or other people we're advising from being able to take action?
Well, I think first what we have to do is, and by the way, let me say this, I'm glad that stat stuck and resonated with you the same way it did with me, because that's one of those that I heard. And when I first heard it, I went, wait a minute, how is it possible? And I think it was in 2021. So a little over a year ago where I heard it for the first time. And I sat there and I was like, how is it possible that this is the first time that I'm seeing or hearing about this? Because remember, I've been thinking about this stuff or trying to research it and study it for the better part of 2 or 3 years at that point. And it finally surfaced, right? So that's one of those that I go, I don't understand. It kind of makes sense, right? I think we probably don't want to know too much about that because that's a little bit of an indicting stat, right?
It is
guilt-inducing, gut-wrenching.
Yeah, but you think you're doing all this good work, right? You've built this. I saw you said this yesterday. You can build the perfect plan, but it's like building a house and never moving into it if you don't put stuff into action. Like that feels horrible, Brendan. Like really bad.
Well, I wrote that to feel horrible, right? It needs to land somehow. We need to create an impact. No, but I also think it's true, right? Like, you would never build a house and never move in, right? So what's the point of creating a financial plan and never actually following through on it? Now, there's some nuanced arguments in there around it does do some, and I'm good at that. But so first we need to back up and understand one thing that's important, and that is that as human beings, we tend to think that all we need in order to like do something or change our behavior or execute it, or to get things done is just the information on how to do it or the knowledge on how to do it, right? We just think, hey, as long as I know how to do it, that's what I'm going to do, right? So one of my favorite quotes, and in fact, when I was thinking about starting this business back in 2018, one of the things I think that propelled it was when I was on a walk with my dog, Roland, he's a yellow lab. We're out walking. I'm listening to a Tim Ferriss podcast. He has a guest on that says, once again, not something I said, just something I learned from somebody else. So that's a constant theme. But he said, if all we needed was information, we'd all be billionaires with six packs. Now, I get that not everybody wants to be a billionaire. I get that not everybody wants to have a six pack, but think about any area of your life where there's a gap between where you are and where you want to be. And it's such a natural tendency to think like, okay, if I just know what to do, then I can close that gap. Right. So like,
Yeah.
or so the other example I use is like, think about if all we needed was information, we wouldn't just all be billionaires with six packs in perfect shape, but we'd also all be living in blissful marriages with perfect relationships with our
Sure.
kids, right? It's like they can apply to any area of life. It's not an information problem, it's an execution problem. And I think nothing hammers that point home more so than, and I'll give it the quick example of this. They go and they look at heart bypass patients
Right.
who
Yep.
have heart bypass surgery. They tell them, hey, if you don't change your behavior, if you don't eat better, exercise more, smoke less, do these healthy things that you haven't been doing, you're going to have to come back in and get another surgery, another invasive, expensive surgery, or you're going to die. Right. So it's like you've had your warning shot. You had a heart bypass surgery. If you don't eat less, work out more, smoke less, eat healthier, change your lifestyle and behavior, you're either going to die or you're going to have to go through it again and pay a lot of money for another invasive surgery. 90% of the heart bypass patients don't actually change. And so for me, that was sort of this like, okay, hang on. If people aren't going to change in the face of life and death, like we're just not going to change in general, right? We need to start expecting that change is way harder than we think that it is. And so I think that's the first thing to recognize, is that information alone is insufficient and that we should
Right.
expect change to be hard. But if we look at it through the lens of like what you were asking, as far as working with clients day to day, I think there's a lot of different aspects to it. But one of the most important things you can do, I personally, I think if you're trying to ignite change or get somebody to actually follow through, is tie what they need to do to the purpose and the reason behind doing it. Right. So it's not just that I need to lose 10 pounds. It's not just that I need to eat healthier. It's that I'm going to eat, well, let's say I'm going to work out 4 days a week for 30 minutes on my Peloton. It's not just that, it's I'm going to do that. I don't do that, by the way, but as an example, I'm going to do that because because underlying that is my desire, my purpose of, I want to be more present and physically fit so that I can be present and active with my boys, not just now, but also in the future. Right. So is it about getting in shape and losing weight and eating healthy? Yes. But like, what's the real purpose behind it? And nothing will ignite change. Nothing adds fuel to the change fire quite like having a clearly defined purpose or connection and why behind what it is that you're doing. And the more, because that's what creates the motivation. That's what creates this momentum to do the thing that you don't want to do. It's one thing to say, I'm going to wake up and work out tomorrow. It's another thing to say, I want to be present and active with my two boys for the rest of their lives.
I love it. Yeah. And I think once again, what I'm learning from you and have learned from you and going through some of that coursework is just the power of the brain. And really, these still feels like a simple little switch, for you to be able to tell somebody, here are the next steps that we need to take because you've shared this, because this is important to you. And I wonder if you'd also share, I think you have some things that you feel better position people to put things in action. And that's the whole idea of making sure there is some progress, even if it's not perfection. All right. That if you can implement 100, what was it? 100, not doing 100% of something is still okay if we're making forward momentum.
Right. So I'm going to add one more thing to what we were just saying a second ago about purpose, if that's okay, because I think it helps encapsulate, it helps summarize it. But so we all know Dr. Martin Luther King, right?
Sure.
He didn't give an I have a plan speech, right? He gave an I have a dream speech, because plans don't inspire people. They don't inspire action, but dreams do, right? The purpose, the why, the dream is what actually gets people to move. And so he had a big challenge in front of him, right? He had to inspire people, get them to change, get them to do something. And so he could have gotten up there and said, here's my plan of everything that I'm going to do and all the bullet points, but he didn't do that. He painted the dream, and that's what inspires people. Right. So I think that's, if you want to look at a way to sort of like encapsulate that or think about it, I think that's a good relevant one. But yeah, so what you just mentioned is the concept that I call prioritizing being reasonable over rational, meaning you don't have to hit 100% success, 100% perfection in order to start making progress. And the example that I'll give is, I'm going to go back to another health example, because I don't know why I just use a lot of those analogies because I think they're helpful, but and relatable. But imagine like somebody decides that they want to lose weight. So like one of the ways you can lose weight is you can eat less food. You can eat less calories, right? So there's an app out there that says, hey, you want to eat less food or you want to lose weight? You need to eat less food. So tell us how much weight you want to lose. So you say in 6 months, I want to lose 20 pounds. So they go in, they do all the calculations, and it's like, hey,
Yep.
if you want to lose 20 pounds in 6 months, you have to eat 1,200 calories. You can eat no more than 1,200 calories a day. And you sit there and you go, and if you haven't tried this before, if you've never counted calories before, eating 1,200 calories is basically like eating one pretty good sized meal.
Right.
I mean, a really good size meal, but I mean, you could easily eat 1,200 calories in one sitting for lunch, and it's not that hard to do. So the point there being, like, if you're trying to tell somebody something to do that's 100%, that's the rational thing to do. If you want to lose that amount of weight in 6 months, right? That's what you do. But is it actually doable? Right? There's a reason. So if you don't follow through, it's not because you didn't know what to do. It's just because what you're being asked to do wasn't within reason. So it would be better to try and eat 1,800 calories a day. Then like you wouldn't be executing at 100% of what you need to do. But it's better to do that than it is to just not do anything at all and go back to eating the way that you were eating and go back to your old habits. Because that going back to doing nothing isn't going to change anything. But not getting to 1,200, but getting close, getting to 2,000, let's say, like if that's still a reduction, like there's still progress being made. So I think it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, you have to prioritize not just what makes sense rationally, not just the perfect way
Right.
to do it, but like what's a way to do it where it's actually sustainable and doable, where I can stick with it and it feels like it's within the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I love it. So we've kind of put these three pieces of this together. It's, you have to create the environment where you're asking questions to learn what you need to learn, but you got to be able to inspire that action in the right way too. And I know you teach many different ways to do that. So I guess I would want to wrap this kind of up back into you and your business. How do you feel about your role? You being a guide for others, what do you feel is the best way to kind of get advisors engaged in what you're doing? Like the skeptics out there are going to live in this world where they believe that if I have all that information and I tell people what to do, that's good enough. I'm on board a disciple here in the movement that if you truly care about people, you got to learn some of these skills. So how can people find you? Tell us the podcast, it's the website. How can people get connected?
Yeah. So it's funny, like we're talking about behavior change, right? And so in your example, there are people out there who I would ideally like want to change their way of their thinking, right? To get them to buy in. And it's like a behavior change problem or like it's a behavior change issue that I'm trying to solve, right? But I think it's a good lesson for anybody in any realm and any endeavor that I've had to learn that I struggled embracing for a long time, which is you're never going to be able, you can't speak to, connect with, and deliver something to everybody. In fact, like if you're trying to be all things to all people, like you're really selling yourself short, right? But spend more
Sure.
time not trying to broadcast everybody, but resonate with them and reach the people that are truly on board with you, that buy in with you, right? And just focus on attracting those people. So anyway, so the website's wiredplenty.com. That's where you can go. So you sign up for the newsletter that we send out every month. It's basically like the best information and insights that we can possibly find over the course of the month on behavior, psychology, communication. The podcast is called The Human Side of Money. Like you said, mentioned it earlier, but episodes every couple of weeks. And then I'm really active on social media, on Twitter and on LinkedIn as well. So those are the kind of the main ways to connect or learn more about it.
Well, you are teaching courses.
Oh yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So let's shameless plug here. Like, let's throw it out there. This is a great opportunity over the course of a couple of weeks to not just learn about this stuff, but start to put it into practice.
Yeah. Cause that's ultimately, the biggest gap exists between not just knowing what to do, but actually applying it and putting it into practice. Right.
Yeah, sure.
But again, it's a constant theme. It's not just about knowing the information. It's about actually doing something and executing on it. And so that's what the idea of the whole, what I call the master class, is designed to do, is to not just certainly educate, because education is important, but then like try to take and actually learn how to apply it day to day in the work that we do as advisors with in the processes and our practice and our conversations with clients. So that's been my first, that's what I'm most passionate about, is, hey, how can I help accelerate the path to help advisors apply these things in their practice? Because when you do it, it's amazing what you see happen. And I want that for as many people as possible. So I'm constantly on this mission and asking myself, what is the best way? What are the best ways to facilitate that? Right? What is it? A cohort-based program? Is it individual coaching sessions? Is it 6-month, year-long mastermind? And so those are the questions that are constantly running through my mind. But I've my mission sort of evolved, I think, over the past couple months, or I shouldn't say it's evolved, it's become more clear. And I think for me, my main purpose and my main mission is just to start building a community of advisors who are passionate about mastering the human side of advice.
Awesome. So maybe indulge me, last 2 minutes here. I've got some rapid fire questions I'd love for you to kind of just give us quick insight on.
Okay. All right. Quick, I'm not sure. As you can tell, I like to go a little bit long with some of these answers I'm passionate about, but I'll try to be quick.
Let's see what happens.
Okay.
Of all the podcasts, you mentioned you got over 50. I've listened to many of them. Your favorite? What was the best interview you had on one of your podcasts?
You do realize that's like asking who your favorite kid is, right?
I understand that. We'll find out who listens to hear you. Or pick one or two. If somebody had to get started somewhere, right? They listen to this podcast and they're like, oh, all right, I want to hear Brendan. Do you have one that you would point them to? Maybe not picking out favorite guest. Let's not put it in that realm. A good place for somebody to get started.
All right. I'll give the one that I think best encapsulates. That's the second time I've used that today. I'm not even sure if that's what I'm really going for there, but the one that best gives the feel and summarizes what it's about, what the whole mission of what I'm doing is about, that can give you a taste of what you can expect from the other episodes. So instead of my favorite, it would be the gateway episode. I think is the best way to describe it. It would be episode 39 with Carl Richards. It just, when we stopped, we pushed in and pushed record, we both said whatever that was, that's exactly what we're both that hit it on the head. It was weird. They don't all end that way. That was one that ended where it was wow, that was something, it struck a chord. It felt that was just it. That encapsulated everything that we're trying to do. And so that's why I say that, is because first of all, he's awesome. So the majority of the credit goes to Carl, and a lot of people know who Carl Richards is. So, but I give him most of the credit because he's so good at what he does. And I was just there to facilitate the conversation. But I think that's what I would say is not my favorite, but the gateway episode.
That's fine. Well, I'll give you another opportunity to kind of give some other kudos. Who most inspires you in this space?
Ooh, see, that's another tough question. This is one where I could go on for a while because there's so many people, but Carl Richards, definitely. Michael Kitsis, Megan Lertz, but at Nerd's Eye View. Daniel Crosby is influential in this space. Brian Portnoy, he wrote the book, The Geometry of Wealth. Now he has a new program he's taking advisors through. Man, I'm trying to think of Amy Mullen at Money Quotient, George Kinder, the father of life planning, right? It's I got to give shout outs to two people that I think are under the radar. Sarah Newcomb, she's now recently, I think she's the head of behavioral something at Morningstar. It's a kind of new thing. I can't remember what her official title is, but I think her work, some of the most underrated in our industry. And then Natalie Taylor, who does a bunch of things, but she is a financial planner. Her episode, one that I enjoyed, and when we ended, it was that was a really good one. But to this day, where I can't put my finger on it, but it's one of the most popular episodes to this day, and I still get people that rave about it. And she's been on other podcasts now because people heard it and thought man, she's really good. And she's somebody that's just comes up all over the place as impressing people. And she's somebody that any chance I get to hear from her, learn from her, I take that opportunity.
Awesome. Most rewarding part of the work you do?
Man, these are hard. See, okay, these are good questions that should get good answers. Right. So now I feel the pressure to give a good answer. I'd say, okay, so this is the best. I'll use an example that I think will explain it, because there's probably a number of things, but like number one is just the ability to help people impact lives, or to impact lives in general, help people improve their relationships, their connection, and help them turn around and improve their clients' lives, is rewarding. I saw a video yesterday where this guy was on a podcast. He was talking about how he had listened to the human side of money, how he followed my content. He started applying what we were talking about in the work he was doing in prospect meetings, and it had changed it had changed what he was doing, and now he's getting more clients as a result, right? So just hearing that, and he's in the UK, so hearing about this advisor in the UK who decided to do this because he's been following the stuff that we put out there and that we teach, and it's led to a change in his business, and it helped his business like that. I mean, that's rewarding. And then here in a minute, when we're done, I'm about to record a training for a firm in South Africa. So I think that's the other rewarding part, is sitting there going like, wait a minute, like I never in my wildest dreams imagined that I could help impact lives around the world. And even saying it out loud just sounds like bizarre to this day. I'm not sure that'll ever actually sink in. So
it's awesome work. I got two more quick ones for you, and then we'll wrap it up. True or false, you've been lying to us all this time and your real name's Joe?
Oh man, legal first name is Joseph. So it's Joseph Brendan Frazier.
Joseph.
And I'm just going to say this real quick, because I feel like I have to. Anytime it comes up, if you're going to have kids, if you've already had them, I'm sorry about this advice. If you're going to have kids, whatever you do, don't give them a full, don't name them Joseph Brendan Frazier and call them Brendan. Actually, don't name them Joseph Brendan Frazier, period. But don't call them by their middle name. It just creates more problems in life than you could ever imagine.
Awesome. We'll wrap it up here. Again, this has been awesome. You are like a celebrity to me. On a scale of 1 to 5, how did I do? How good was I at asking some questions today?
Yeah, I'm gonna go 4.3, because you can never be satisfied. I've never met anybody that's just an expert at it, right? It doesn't have room for improvement. But you did a great job in my humble meaning.
That's a generous grade. This was awesome. Again, thank you for making the time to do this. And as you shared, it's wiredplanning.com, podcast, human side of money, and check out the newsletter. I know you're doing more master classes, and as somebody that had that experience, I found it very, very helpful. So for anybody that wants to learn more, I'm sure they can reach out to you there.
Yeah, thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. And I joke with you and a few others that it's people like you that sort of ruin the experience, because you show up, you do the work, you're great at it, you're invested, right? So like, it's the situation where you have the client you wish you could clone a million times. Like that would be nice if I could figure out a way to clone a bunch of Ben Haas's around the world. I admire how invested and how invested you are in the work that you do, and the diligence and the effort that you put into it. And anyways, it's obvious. It comes through, and you don't see that. Sadly, it's just not the norm.
Yeah, but it's getting there. And that's kudos to you and everybody that you mentioned that has been inspiring you. And, you took a huge leap of faith a couple of years ago to do this. And I think you're seeing the impact. And whether that's at 1,200 people right now, and there's a huge gap, good work is going to spread. And I think, you're motivated in the same way I am, that if we can affect one person, that one person can affect somebody else. The web's going to get bigger. So thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I genuinely enjoyed it and appreciate it.